This meeting of the Anderson Township Board of Zoning Appeals is hereby called to order. This board was established pursuant to Section 519.13 of the Ohio Revised Code by the Anderson Township trustees to provide administrative relief to any person or entity adversely affected by the Anderson Township zoning resolution. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Nasilevich?
Here.
Mr. Halpin?
Here.
Ms. Wagner? Here. Mr. Skank?
Here.
Mr. Sion?
Here. Thank you for coming to this meeting of the Anderson Township Board of Zoning Appeals. Please be aware that this meeting is audio and videotaped and may be carried live on television. First, I'll outline our procedures. Summary of the appeal is presented by the staff, then the appellant will present its case. The board members may then ask questions of the appellant. After that, all persons supporting the appeal will then be permitted to testify, one at a time, after being recognized by the chairman. When those persons supporting the appeal are finished, those opposed to the appeal will then be permitted to testify and/or ask questions of the board after being recognized by the chairman. All persons wishing to testify, whether for or against an appeal, may only do so after being sworn in. When testifying, each person must come forward to the podium after being recognized, speak into the microphone, and state their name, address, and any affiliation to the case. All persons testifying will be limited to 4 minutes unless a board member requests additional time. All testimony is given to the board only. No comments or questions are to be directed to the appellant or anyone else in the audience. The board will only hear new, non-repetitive evidence or questions. Should someone wish to show support of previous testimony, they may do so by following the testimony procedures and stating their support of previous testimony. And will all persons who may give testimony this evening please stand, raise your right hand, and swear or affirm. Swear to tell the whole truth. Sorry, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
There are none.
Can we get a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda as written.
Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Nasilevich?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Ms. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Skank?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. Any comments or edits to the meeting minutes from October 4th, 2018?
No.
Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes as written.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the minutes. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Nasilevich?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Ms. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Skank?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Abstain. With that, we'll go on to continuation of case number 10-2018 BZA, conditional use requests for extension of previously granted conditional use at 4455 Mount Carmel Road. Does the staff, do you have a summary for the case or have any additional comments?
We'll go over what has happened up until this point. We won't go through our full staff report. So that's how we'll go today.
Okay, please proceed.
And I just want it noted that I have reviewed the previous meetings and am up to date on where things are at.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathleen. Okay, so these are our standards our standards to be considered with this case. This is case number 10, 2018 BZA. The applicant is Zach Peterson on behalf of Evans Gravel. The location is 4455 Mount Carmel Road, and it's zoned industrial. The request is a conditional use request to extend a conditional use permit for case 16, 2003 BZA and case 2, 2009 BZA for an additional 15 years for a surface mine. So, like I said, I'll go ahead and give a history of what's happened up until this point. A conditional use approval for a surface mine was originally issued in October of 2003 with 11 conditions for 5 years and included a 1 year to complete pre-mining preparations, including clearing, obtaining equipment, securing suppliers, and additional preparations before surface mining. The BZA then heard the request for an extension on February 5th of 2009 in case 2, 2009 BZA, and continued the case for 6 months so that the applicant could demonstrate compliance with the original conditional use permit of October 3rd, 2003. Case 2, 2009 BZA was heard again on August 6th, 2009, November 5th, 2009, and January 7th, 2010, allowing the applicant time to include additional information and answer the board's questions. The Board of Zoning Appeals granted approval of the conditional use extension in Case 2, 2009, with 26 conditions. This is all, the rest of this history is what's happened with this case 10, 2018. So at the July 12th, 2018 meeting, case 10, 2018 BZA was continued to the August 2nd, 2018 meeting. Due to lack of time to gather materials, the case was then continued again until our September 6th meeting. At the September 6th meeting, the Board of Zoning Appeals, the case was continued with the request of more information, and at that time, the public hearing was closed. At the October 4th, 2018 meeting, the case was continued because there were only 3 board members present, and the Board of Zoning Appeals bylaws state that for a motion to be approved, it takes 3 votes, so it would have had to be a unanimous decision. For that reason, the applicant chose to continue the case to tonight's meeting. Due to the fact that the conditional use permit was set to expire on October 20th, 2018, a motion was unanimously approved to extend the conditional use for 60 days. So that's where we're at this point. This is a map of the property in the surface mine. This is an aerial view of it, and then this is a topography map with the site plan. These are all pictures that were taken on site when staff visited the site. And with that, like I said, I'm not going to go through all of these conditions. Like I mentioned, the public hearing has been closed at this point. If the board wishes to open the public hearing, that is an option. But at that point, I think we should turn it over to the board for discussion. So.
And if I might add as well, obviously, as was said, the public comment portion of the hearing was closed, and the board requested additional information. It may be wise, just based off some Ohio case law that's out there, for you to open up the meeting back for public comment to the extent that the applicant or anyone wants to say anything additional, particularly as it relates to the new evidence presented. Otherwise, obviously, whatever new evidence is presented, no one has the opportunity to cross-examine or to explore the veracity of that information. So I think it may be a good idea for the board to open up the public comment portion to accept testimony as it relates to the new evidence presented.
Okay. Is that something we need to make a motion on? Or?
Yep, that's all you need.
I move that we open up the case for public comment, case number 10, 2018, so as to be able to discuss any new evidence that can be presented.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Nasilevich?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Ms. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Skank?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. With that, the public hearing is reopened for this case. Does the board have any questions of staff?
Yeah. Are all the conditions being met?
Well, that's a good question. So there are a few that are outstanding that we are actually, I think, are going to leave it up to the board whether they're in compliance with. A few of them, I'll go through quickly. Condition number 5, which states that that at the beginning of the 24th and the 60th month of prior to, or I'm sorry, after the permit was issued, Evans was to give staff any complaints that were issued on the property, and those were not submitted. So all of the comments, or I'm sorry, all of the conditions that haven't necessarily been met, Zach Peterson has responded to, and those are in front of you, and all of the conditions that are in red are ones that we feel need more information.
So how can you rectify number 5?
Should we let the applicant?
I think so. Yeah. I'm not sure how. I think it would be ultimately, we would have to forgive them that they didn't meet that condition.
Can't they just make a statement that they haven't had anything submitted in writing?
I think that could be an option.
That's really up to this board, however it wants to proceed with the fact that obviously they didn't have laws at the time or statements, but you all get to decide what to do with it.
Okay.
Testimony being provided today is sworn testimony too, so we theoretically could even take that as well.
Okay, so 5 was one, 20
Yeah.
was another?
Yes, hold on, I can, yeah, so 5 was the first one. 20 was another one, and this one was that the gravel storage piles could be no higher in elevation than the right-of-way on Mount Carmel Road. So again, the applicant has responded to this, and the response is before you here.
Okay, and then,
And I can read that if you would like, or we can continue going through the conditions that haven't.
well, we've only
Necessarily
got,
been
what,
met.
one more, 26?
Yes,
So we
so,
have 3 conditions,
yes,
and number 26.
26, yeah, 26 is about the maximum capacity of 100 tons per hour for the equipment.
So they haven't given you anything that would satisfy you as staff
This-
regarding these issues?
What they've provided is on the slide before you. That is the response from the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions of staff? With that, would the appellant please step forward, wish to present their case? Please.
May it please the board, my name is Zach Peterson, and it's my honor to be here on behalf of Evans Gravel tonight. Seated in the gallery, we have several employees of Evans Gravel and some other employees of Evans Landscaping that are here tonight on behalf of the company. I'd like to start by thanking this board and staff. I know this is the 3rd time we've met and the 3rd time we've submitted responses, and I know everybody's worked really hard at this, myself included, and I know this has taken a lot of time, and so I just wanted to thank you guys for your patience, and hopefully we can wrap this up tonight. I will proceed however the board and staff sees fit. There is some new evidence that I'd like to discuss tonight, and I can tick through each of these conditions because we do have some things to say about them, and I can back those. Those things are backed up with evidence that are submitted in your binders. Hopefully we have our binders tonight. And we can have the discussion at the same time if you guys would like to do a Q&A at the same time. It's totally up to the board members how we proceed here. I can go in order. If the board members have specific conditions they would like the applicant to address, we can proceed however you guys see fit.
So what conditions, I show we got 4 conditions, number 5, number 20, number 23, and number 26. All those have the red writing.
Yes, sir.
And you've responded to all of those.
Yes, sir.
So could you go ahead and just tell us why you believe that those conditions have been met so that we can make a decision on this tonight?
Yes, and so let me start with...
Can I add one more thing?
Yes, sir.
Some of the other conditions, if there's new
Evidence.
you please hit on those too.
I will, and so I'll start with the 5 in red, and then there are some conditions, so there's been some movement, particularly on the EPA permits, actually today. And so it is the position of Evans Gravel that 4 of those 5 conditions that are in red, all of them except number 5, we have complied with. And when it comes to number 5, let's just come out and say it. We didn't do it. We didn't turn in the reports. It was an administrative oversight. We did not turn in those reports stating that there had been no complaints at that time. We did not submit those reports. I'm not standing up here trying to play smoke and mirrors. This isn't a game of hide the ball. We are owning the fact that we did not submit those reports. Everything else that we have is submitted and backed up by evidence. We did not submit those reports. Now, that being said, there were no complaints. There were no complaints from these agencies. So no, we did not submit the reports, but in substance, there was nothing to submit. There were no complaints. So if we look at the response of Evan Gravel to number 5, it's after the 12th and 60th month since the permit was issued. That would have been January 26, 2012, would have been the 24th month, excuse me, not the 12th. And January 26, 2015 would have been the 60th month. At that time, Evans was in compliance with all of these agencies in the conditions of its current certificate. And so, because we're on the record here, and I will just state it, and to Mr. Halpin's point earlier tonight, this response serves as Evans' documentation that both on January 26, 2012 and January 26, 2015, both the 24th and the 60th month, Evans was in compliance with these agencies, in the conditions of the current certificate. The only non-compliance issue, as the board is aware, arose in April of this year, 2018, and those are the EPA issues. So this is the only condition of the 26-plus conditions that Evans overlooked, and again, it amounts to a mere record-keeping thing. It does not relate in any way to the conduct or the activities that are occurring on the site. It's just a piece of paper that was not submitted. The remainder of the conditions in red, we believe we have complied with. Are there any questions at all as concerns condition number 5?
Just to refresh my memory from past hearings, is this something you're going to be doing going forward in terms of keeping a log, even though you may not get anything, but you'll have some sort of log?
Yes, and I believe one of the other conditions, and maybe more on the board members can help me out here, number 18, if we can, Mr. Bowers, can we get to number 18? Thank you, sir. So if you take a look at number 18, there was some confusion in the past about if there were no complaints, there was this question that rose about whether a complaint log needed to be submitted, if it were blank. And it wasn't submitted, and that was Evans' understanding at that point, and I think there was some confusion on that. And so, as Evans has stated and is correctly reflected in the staff's report there, that moving forward, Evans will maintain a complaint log. And even if that complaint log is blank, we will provide that to the township. And so I think that hopefully that addresses that.
Thank you.
Mr. Halpin, would you like to move forward with the next items in red?
Yes.
So let's go, I believe the next one is number 20?
Yep.
Okay. So number 20 basically states that the storage piles of gravels on the site can be no taller than the right-of-way elevation immediately adjacent to the mine's current property ingress and egress point. That's like some lawyer language, but basically means that the top piles of gravel can't be higher than the road. That's all it says. And so for the 5 or so staff members that were on the site, when you enter the mine from the road, you go down a pretty good hill, and it's a lot lower. Mr. Bowers, are we able to pull up any of those pictures that you showed before? I'm not sure. So as you can see, that's a good one right there. So behind those pieces of equipment is essentially the level of the Mount Carmel Road. Now, Mount Carmel Road's sort of behind the person who took the photograph there. But as you can see, there's this very, very steep grade there. And so the piles are a lot further down than that. And so I think, there were 5 members of staff on site, and I don't think that anyone said that those piles were taller than the road. I think actually Mr. Drury stated that, the brush had really grown up, and it was really hard to kind of see what was going on down in there, and that brush had grown up over a period of years. So we don't think that you can see any of the storage piles from the road because none of them are taller than the road. I would also point you to Exhibit V, I believe it is, in your binders. If you pull out Exhibit V, there are some pictures from the road.
V is in Bravo?
V is in
V is in
Victor, I'm
Victor.
sorry. V is in Victor. And so the first picture there is the entrance of the mine. And so to your left, it goes down the hill and you enter the mine. There's a huge berm in between the mine and Mount Carmel Road. And so not only do you have the berm, which is covered in grass, but it's just a dirt berm. It has a ton of vegetation that has grown up over that. And if you're standing on the road, it is very, very difficult to see any of the gravel in the mine. You have to go into the mine itself and look at the gravel. It's not visible from the road. And so you can kind of flip those pictures. There's 3 or 4 of them, and they kind of help to illustrate that point. I think probably the best one is probably, you can go either with number 2 or number 3. Those are pictures being taken from Mount Carmel Road looking into the mine. And conspicuously absent in those pictures is any view of gravel. I certainly don't see any gravel. And so if you go back to condition number 20, we think that those pictures, in conjunction with staff's visit of the site back in July 6th, as those pictures are dated there, I think proves that we have satisfied this condition and that it is, in fact, we're complying with it and not non-compliant.
The pictures that we just saw,
Yes, sir.
what were those mounds that were in there? Were those just plain dirt?
Yeah, it's just a dirt berm. And so we were required, I believe, under the certificate to have a berm to help block not only the site, so those are pictures of some of the materials that we have in the mine.
So are there no pictures of the gravel piles?
That would be a picture of some of the materials that are mined right there. That looks more like sand.
Zach, I might help you just a little bit. Just to kind of help you a little bit. If you guys would go there today, there's no gravel there. There might be a couple hundred tons. There might only be piles tall as me. The only pile that's in that picture right there is sand, okay? And it's getting eaten up pretty fast because that's in the construction season. It's hard to maintain the gravel, you know. It's not something we just press a button and make the gravel, but there's no gravel on the site as far as processed gravel, any piles that are taller than, there might only be a 20-foot pile. That pile there is sand. And it's not any taller than the berm of the thing, but it's going down fast. So, you know, it's pretty much a mute issue on the whole thing because we just can't make it fast enough in the supply. We don't have any.
And sir, just to confirm, you're Mr. Evans? You're the applicant?
Yeah, there's another Evans there and another Evans there.
Got it.
For the record, they want to know who's talking.
Can you provide your address, please?
Doug Evans, 3700 Round Bottom Road, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45244.
And you were sworn in, sir?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So does that help to kind of explain number 20?
Yep.
Are there any other questions from any other board members about number 20 or staff about number 20? The next red condition that I have on my sheet is number 23. Number 23 relates to the maximum output of the machinery on the site. And it says, the impactor to be used in conjunction with the gravel mining operation shall be limited to a maximum capacity of 100 tons per hour. Staff notes that more information is needed to determine compliance. In the reality of mining, and I think I've mentioned it a couple times in these hearings, is this. You spend about half of the time mining, and you spend about another half of the time working on the equipment. And the reality of the mining equipment is that it just doesn't, it can't run all the time. The nature of mining is that it's really it's an endurance test of mechanics is really what it is. And you spend a lot of time repairing and maintaining the equipment. And so that's sort of just anecdotal testimony about time, but I think the numbers bear it out. And so under the certificate, Evans is permitted to extract 200,000 tons per year. And so Evans, to date, despite being able to extract that much, has only produced are extracted about 45,000 tons per year. So if you use, a 40-hour work week, you're doing about 22 tons per hour, which is about 1/5 of what the conditional permit allows us to do. And so if you just look at the numbers, I don't think that there's any realistic way that that equipment is producing more than 100 tons per hour. For the past 15 years, it's produced 22 tons per hour. And I can think of no better evidence than the actual numbers extracted to prove that point.
Were those numbers supplied to staff then?
Yes, those numbers have been given to staff. I believe one of the exhibits has the number of extracted materials that have come out of the mine. And off the top of my head, I'm not sure which exhibit that is, but I am confident that we produced that exhibit.
So a document other than a written document by you?
No. All right, Exhibit L. So if you look at Exhibit L,
Is in Lima?
L is in Lima. There are 45,000, so those are the numbers that we have produced on an annual basis.
So this is your document, though?
This is our document, that's correct.
Do you have a document that would show beyond yourself, like a state document or?
All of these numbers are submitted to the Mine and Safety Health Administration, MSHA, which governs mines. These are submitted, they're a public record, it's a national institution, we submit it to them. So these are the same, we took these numbers from our submittals to ODNR, Ohio Division of Natural Resources, and MSHA. That's where these numbers come from.
Mr. Halpin, I got one thing that might help you.
Yes, sir.
A crusher, we very seldom ever use. We don't have limestone, we just have round little pieces of gravel from sand to about like this big. It's a wet plant. All we do is take it, dump it in the thing, and every once in a while, if we want to make something else, we turn the crusher on. So we crush very little material because we can't make enough round stuff for drainage material, the 57s and the pea gravel that we use, and the sand. The only thing we crush at all is bigger material. And once you go in the mine and the mine goes down, you don't have any big material left. It's just water level stuff. It's finer material. So not to try to act like I know everything, but the little crusher that we have there, right on the crusher, it says it only do, if we're doing 200 ton an hour, there's only going to be maybe 10% of that goes even through the crusher, which most of the time we don't even run the crusher.
So a question for you. When you're mining, the gravel is natural, it's a natural product, is that correct?
Everything's all natural.
So what you're talking about using the crusher for is for stuff that's stone or slabs of stone or something like that?
No.
But not gravel?
When we first did this thing, everybody was scared because of Martin Moretta going way down to get limestone. You have to crush a limestone to get the size you want. Our stuff is already the size we want it. All we do is put it over a screen with a little bit of water, okay? Our crusher makes a little noise, but everybody's worried about crushers, all these huge crushers crushing concrete and crushing all the other material that a limestone mine might produce. So that's why that was in there. But as far as our crusher goes, it's just a real small crusher that we can use. If the blacktop company says, hey, we want some 57s that aren't round, we want them, we can throw a little bit, the bigger pieces, do the crusher to put a sharp edge on them to make it so it holds better than a bunch of marbles. But right now, we're trying to get as many marbles and round stuff out, so we hardly ever used a crusher.
And that's all the natural stuff, so basically all you're doing is digging
We don't have anything
up.
except natural stuff. It's just water, putting the stuff through a little sieve, and that's why the dust and all the stuff, it's all putting water in order to clean it.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just a quick question. The crusher is one piece of equipment. What other types of equipment are you using? I mean, you got
There's screens, there's hoppers, there's sort of conveyors, so you may put the material, you may load the material into a hopper. It may go through different screens to separate the different sizes of materials. One size material will go on a conveyor and go this way. Another size material will go on a conveyor and go this way. They fall off the conveyors at a very short distance, probably no taller than what this podium is to the ground. and then they form little piles on the ground. And that goes back to the other point. The piles that are formed are very small piles. We're not running enough to get these huge, giant piles that you would be able to see from Mount Carmel Road. Are there any other questions on number 23 from staff or any of the board members? I think the other two, if I'm correct, the ones that I have on my sheet that are red are subsets of this specific criteria, number 4 and number 5.
Correct.
And I think that those are subsets of 26, yes, that's correct. And so I'm going to sort of borrow our response, if you will, Mr. Bowers, if we could bring up number 8. And I think number 8 and the exhibits that I'll point the board to kind of answer that. And so if you go to 20, you don't need to do it. I'm just redoing number 26, 4, and 5. So number 26, 4, and 5 deal with what the township calls performance standards, conditional performance standards. They are nuisance-related items. Included in nuisance-related items would be things such as noise emissions, dust emissions, vibrations, shock. Those are the things that are covered by 26, 4, and 5. 4 is vibration or shock. 5 is actually, it says, nuisances. And so I think the response is in number 8. And can we go to, Mr. Bowers, can we go one page further and go to Evan's response? We don't have that yet. Okay.
It was one of the ones that we felt were already in compliance. That's why we didn't put the
Oh, you already felt it was in compliance.
number
Well,
8.
and that, it's in yours. Okay. So I guess from our perspective, number 8 and number 26, 4, and 5 are really the same. So if staff believes that we're in compliance with number 8, I think by definition we have to be in compliance with 26 subset 4 and 26 subset 5. And I'll explain why. Number 8 refers to the Savage Walker letter. If you can open up your binder to Exhibit R, as in Randy. That is the Savage Walker letter from 2003. The Savage Walker letter from 2003, identified as Exhibit R in your binder, is merely a recitation of the performance standards in 2003, the then Anderson Township performance standards that are outlined in 26 subsection 4 and 26 subsection 5. That is what Exhibit R is. If you flip one more exhibit, you have Exhibit S, as in Sam, S1 and S2. S1 and S2 are opinion letters from qualified environmental experts that were engaged to measure the performance standards. That is the nuisance type activities, vibration, shock, noise, dust, these types of things. Those are what's being referred to in 26 subsection 4 and 26 subsection 5. I included, Ms. Wagner pointed out, I think the board members have our full response there in number 8. And so I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but I will basically say that the conclusions reached in Exhibits S1 and S2 state without a doubt that Evans has complied with those conditional standards. I will take some of the highlights and then I'll go to the exhibits themselves. The first exhibit, S1, is from Matt Wagner, who has several years of experience as an environmental consultant for a nationally known environmental firm called Tetra Tech. He stated in his letter that, and concluded in his letter, that Evans Gravel is operating in an environmentally conscientious manner and that no dust, smoke, gas, or noise emissions were being emitted at levels that seemed excessive of normal business operations. That is what one expert concluded. We engaged another expert. His name is George Kipp. George Kipp is sort of a local legend of sorts. He used to work for Indian Hill. He has been doing this for 46 years. And he came out and he brought with him what is called a dosimeter. And if you're like me and didn't know what a dosimeter was until we did this hearing, a dosimeter measures noise. And so he brought a dosimeter with him, and he opined, based on his personal observations at the site and his 46 years of experience, that it was his professional opinion that this Evans gravel facility is in compliance with the original zoning certificate issued by Anderson Township. That is included in S1. In reaching this conclusion, George Kipp also stated that he did not observe any odor, smoke, gas, oil, excess dust, or uncontrolled noise emissions being emitted. And so I think what we have there fully addresses number 4 and number 5. These people are qualified experts. They brought with them fancy machinery that can measure noise and vibration and shock and dust better than, simple human perception. And these people have a lot of experience, and this is what they opined. And they both opined, clear as a bell, that Evans is in compliance with the performance standards set forth by Anderson Township. And so I think that that covers 26, 4, and 5, and I think it also covers number 8, and so we won't go back to that. I would point out this. If you go, the performance standards set forth in Anderson Township, and there was a lot of testimony from the public about, hey, I live sort of close, and hey, I'm not really sure if it's Pavestone or B-Way or Stoneworks or whoever down there, but like there's some noise and dust. And so let's be clear about what the law says, about what those performance standards say. And what those performance standards say is that there's not zero inconvenience. The performance standards don't say no dust. The performance standards don't say no noise. The performance standards don't say no inconvenience. And so if you look at those performance standards, they merely require, it's section 3.16E5 of the Township zoning regulations, and it requires that Evans use the best practical means known for abatement of the nuisance. That's what the performance standards require. That's what the law requires of Evans. And that is in the performance standards. And so I think when you take that standard, again, it is not no noise, no dust, no inconvenience. That is not what the performance standards look at. They use best practical means known for abatement of the nuisance. So then the question is rightly asked to Evans, well, what practical means did you use to abate the nuisance? And as Mr. Evans just testified to, we use water for the dust. Not only do we use water when we process the material through the plant, we have a water truck that we use on site to keep track of the dust. We have a wheel wash. So when the trucks are leaving the site, they go through a wheel wash. It knocks most of the dust and the mud and everything off the truck tires, so there's not a lot of dust and we're not tracking mud all over the road. We are starting to use on the conveyors, we're using rubber-coated systems instead of metal systems. You can imagine a bunch of gravel hitting metal and it may ding and ting and make some noise. That's why we're using rubber ones now. So we're starting to replace those to use rubber ones. So if the law says you have to use best practical means known for abating the nuisance, I think that we are doing that. I think that the employment of the wheel wash, the use of water, the use of a water truck, I think the fact that we have a huge berm that has a lot of trees and brush, and what does those trees and brush do? Well, they block a lot of the dust. They also block a lot of the noise. And I think the combination of all those things shows that we are performing and using best practical means for abating of the nuisance, and that is what the law requires. Are there any other questions about 26 subsection 4 or 5? And I think that that covers number 8 as well. I think those things are somewhat duplicative. Nope. So I think that those are the red ones, if we were going to use the terminology. Those are the red conditions. Again, we're going to own it. Number 5 was an administrative oversight. We didn't keep the records, and we will do that moving forward. The rest of them, I think that we're in compliance.
No question.
No questions. I have some, to your point, I have some other evidence on some of the other conditions if the board would indulge me for a minute, and I can show that there's been some movement. And so if we go back to number 1, condition number 1. And so condition number 1 says, hey, Evans, there are a lot of governmental agencies out there, and you need to comply with all of them. That's basically what it says. And so we have a couple EPA issues going on, or we did, I should say. And I guess I'll note to begin with, there's a lot of government agencies that oversee our operations on that site, and we've had no issues with them. And so we've had a couple minor EPA issues here, and let's talk about those. So number 1 was this holding tank. And I've got email correspondence. I've got email correspondence today from the EPA that states that we have now completed everything that we need to complete with the holding tank. And so I'll read the relevant portion. I realize you guys don't have this, you're getting it right now. These permits have to go through a public comment period. That public comment period closed on October 26th. The EPA did not receive any comments. That's typical. Therefore, and I quote, Broadwell's permit has been sent for final issuance. Once Broadwell's permit is issued, the application for the holding tank PTI and management plan will be complete. And so I can't say that I have the permit in hand, but what I can say is that there's nothing left to be done other than somebody in Columbus has to put a stamp on a piece of paper. Otherwise, we have met everything that has to do with the holding tank. As concerns the MPDS permit, EPA wanted to come out and do a site visit on October 17th. We did that with EPA. They requested a bunch of more stuff. We've given them everything. The ball is not in our court. We have been super responsive. We have given them everything they need. And so what the EPA says in this email is that our discussions regarding the contents of the permit application. Current Evans is waiting on a response for Ohio EPA regarding any additional revisions that may be needed to permit the application. And so there could be nothing. We could be in the same position that we're in with the holding tank, which we've given them everything that they need. They just have not confirmed that with us. But what they have confirmed is that the delay, if there's any delay, and that's the way we want to look at it, is not on our side, it's on their side reviewing that. And so my experience with these permits, and sometimes I forget, my experience. So this is not a matter of if we'll get the permit, we will get the permit. And EPA is committed to getting the permit. They want the permit. It's just a matter of when. And so what I don't want the board members to think is, well, hey, Evans might not get this permit, and this might be like an ongoing compliance issue for a really long time. That's not the case. These permits always issue. There's just usually a lot of back and forth about what professional drawings we need and what flow charts we need and what testing we're going to do and all these little things that go into an MPDS permit. Are there any questions about that part of number 1? And I'll get into the second part of number 1 here in a second. So again, the holding tank, in summary, the holding tank, we're good to go. And the MPDS permit, we've done everything that we can do at this point, and we're hopefully the EPA will accept that. And if not, whatever the EPA asks for, we will obviously do. We will obviously do. And I guess one other permit, or one other comment to piggyback on Mr. Evans' comment earlier about the MPDS permit. And when I brought this to the regulator's attention, she kind of laughed. And I said, well, here's the issue. You issue a notice of violation, which I get. But it says that we failed to get a permit to discharge industrial wastewater, right? And that has like a really negative connotation to it. Industrial wastewater, like it's some sort of factory that we have, or we're like pumping green goo into the river. And that's not what it is. And she sort of laughed and she said, well, no, that's just the language we use on all of our NOVs. And for other factories, for Senco, for example, they may produce other types of waste, other types of companies that use fuel and lubricants and all these other things in their process. They're producing other types of waste. What Mr. Evans said is 100% true. We don't use any of that. We dig stuff out of the ground and we put water on it. And there's some hoppers and some other things or whatever else, but there's no lubricants, there's no fuel, there's no chemicals being used. We're not discharging industrial waste as you would normally understand that term. It is an all-natural production. And so I just didn't want any of the board members thinking that there's some like green goo coming out of Evans. That is not true. It's just water that happens to touch gravel that was already in the ground. That's all it is. Are there any other questions on the EPA portion of number 1?
Remind me, Senco does send things into, discharge into your,
Senco
Property.
does send things, and that's about as specific as I understand it as well.
right, but
Send-
then aren't you responsible for those things that wind up in your discharge?
Pond.
That goes beyond?
Yes and no. So yes, insofar as those materials come on to us from Senco, and we have no control or input or anything to do with that. They just come on to us, and then we sort of have to deal with them. But understand that Senco has an NPDES permit too, and so everything that is being released onto us meets EPA approval. Because Senco, there's what the EPA calls an outfall. So when, imagine Senco's land is here, and our land is here. There's like a little pipe, literally, right here on Senco's land. It's called an outfall. And what the NPDES permit does is it requires some third-party testing company to come in here and test that water when it leaves Senco to make sure that it's not polluting anything. And so Senco has its own NPDES permit for that purposes. So the water coming off of Senco, if the factory's here and the outfall's here, there's some sort of cleaning process in between, so that when that water comes out and it's tested by these third-party labs, it's clean water. It's not polluting anything. It's clean water. Otherwise, Senco would be in violation of their permit. So the water that we get from Senco, yes, does arise from whatever Senco's activities are, but it is clean water by the time it touches us. And obviously, we don't do anything with it to dirty it up, other than it touches some gravel and some mud, and that's it. So yes and no. Does that kind of help answer the question? Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I thought you said that process of washing the gravel does create a particle that would trigger some kind of violation. Is that true?
It triggers testing, and so we have to stay within certain parameters. So when that water touches the gravel and touches the dirt, it may have, from EPA's perspective, too much dissolved oxygen or too much ammonia, or there's a laundry list of 20 different chemicals. And so when that water comes through our property and touches the gravel, and then it goes down the creek, and then it's discharged out, we will have testing. We will have the outfall that Senco had. We will have an outfall here at the end, and that will be tested, and we will have to stay within certain parameters to make sure that we're not exceeding our limits. So we may have to, for example, a common one is, well, there's not enough oxygen in the water. And so sometimes you just have to drop an aeration pump in there, just as simple as putting some bubbles into the water to get more oxygen. We've had to do that on a couple NPDES permits. So whatever we ultimately discharge that we take from Senco and it touches all of our stuff, it will have to comply with all these parameters as well. And so what we will discharge is clean water. And that's the whole point, really, of an NPDES permit, is to make sure that we're discharging clean water. There has been no allegations that we're discharging dirty water. That's not the point of an NPDES permit. The point is to make sure that we aren't doing that. But no one has said, hey, Evans, you guys are like polluting and putting dirty water into the river. No one has said that. The whole point of the permit is to have a process in place to test that to make sure that we aren't. And if that happens, that we take some steps to remedy it. Does that help? Okay. Any other questions on the EPA? I know that was kind of a big one for a while. Okay. I can tick through some other ones if we would like to. I don't also, if you guys have heard what you need to hear, I also want to be respectful of your time too. If there are other things that we want to talk about, we can do that. If you guys have discussions on, would like to have some discussion on some of those other compliance issues, we've got a lot of stuff that we've sort of responded and put in the packets that you have before you. I don't have any new evidence really other than what I handed out with the EPA. I certainly have some comments about some of these other conditions, but I can do that on a question basis, or I can keep going forward. It's however you guys would like me to proceed.
Keep going.
Keep going, okay. So, the next part of condition number 1 relates to this opacity test. And so, in our view, we are in compliance with the opacity test, and maybe the township and staff agree, or maybe not, but the opacity test was designed to be a one-time test. And so what the condition requires is that we do the opacity test, and we did the opacity test. And the condition further says, in the event that the approved conditional use falls out of compliance with any of the relevant regulations, yada, 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 then the BZA will do something. So it's conditional. And so there has been no evidence, and I don't think that there's any allegation that that opacity test has fallen out of compliance. And so I think that we're in compliance here. If you could open up your packets, again, to Exhibit K. So Exhibit K is, it's a letter from Mr. Drury, dated August 12, 2011. I want to bring your attention to about midway through the page. There's some bold font in the middle that says, condition number 1 states in part, opacity test shall remain current throughout the duration of the conditional use permit. So in other words, hey, that opacity test that we had in 2009, that needs to stay current. And if it doesn't, well, then you need to fix it. And so if you go about midway through Mr. Drury's paragraph there, it says, in other words, as long as Evans' most recent capacity test has been passed, Evans is in compliance if the Hamilton County Department of Environmental Services require further opacity testing in the future. Evans must pass such test or be considered out of compliance. And so I want to be clear that we took the test. Exhibit O, by the way, is the test or the finding from the test. If you flip to Exhibit O, it's a very lengthy sort of report. And it goes through the methodology of how the opacity was tested and what the readings are, and all these experts who have signed off on this certification. It's a boring read, and so I won't bore you with it, but it's the results of the opacity test. In short, it says we passed. And so if you go back to that condition, Evans is in compliance. It was designed, as staff noted, to be a one-time test. Evans passed the test in 2009. Nobody disputes that. Therefore, Evans is in compliance with that test, and we have never fallen out of compliance with that test. Now, despite that, and despite that we're in compliance, and that there's no real reason to suggest that we're not, we understand that the board would like us to conduct another opacity test, which we will do. We have not done that yet because we weren't sure what the board was going to do with the permit. But if a conditional use permit is extended for some period of time and the board would like to say, hey, Evans, you need to do this opacity test, and you need to have it done within some reasonable amount of time, 60 days or whatever, you know, it does require engaging an expert who has to come out in the field and take the test. We would be more than happy to do that, and we will, of course, do that. But what I didn't want the board to think was that we had somehow fallen out of compliance with the opacity test and had not complied with test condition. We absolutely have, and we are more than willing to do that test again if the board would so like us to do. And that sort of summarizes, I think, that part of number 1. And so I just want to be clear that we're in compliance with that. And so we were hoping to kind of see that in the gray font to use the key that we used. So we don't have a new one, but we would, you know, if we get another certificate here and hopefully we extend the certificate for a period of years, then we would absolutely do that within a reasonable period of time, whatever the board seems reasonable. Are there any other, that concludes kind of condition number 1. Are there any other questions about that? No, okay. Number 2, substantial conformance with the plot plan. Mr. Bowers, you had a really awesome plot plan. Can you get, is there any way to pull that up? Yeah, that was good. The site plan, that's good. Okay, so it says substantial conformance with the plot plan dated August 21, 2003, delineating the 30-acre property, and this is a source of confusion, and I know some of the board members had some confusion about, hey, what's going on with this clean hard fill dump? And I want to talk about that too with this. The 30-acre property, and so staff knows the plot plan was submitted as Exhibit P. Don't even bother flipping to Exhibit P. It's a big giant map that you have to unfold. To staff's point, it received a larger map that I believe staff said was legible and they could understand. And so I think that we're all in agreement that we are in compliance with that. That plot plan was submitted to MSHA. MSHA approved it. For the record, MSHA has approved our ability to continue mining. When MSHA does that, it's conditioned on local zoning, giving us a permit to mine. But MSHA has come out to the site, they've inspected what we've done, they've looked at the plot plan, we've worked with them, and they have approved our ability to continue moving forward pending the decision of the board here today. So, and I think there was some confusion about this acre, this 78 acre parcel. So Mr. Bowers, if you go like back 1 or 2 slides, I think you show the whole property. All right, so either one. That's the whole property. But there's been a lot of confusion, I think, based on the comments about which portion of the whole property, which is 77 acres, is being used for the mining. So that what is outlined in red in front of you is the whole entire 77 acre property. If you go to footnote 1 of the initial request that we put, page 1, footnote 1, it says, Evans conducts gravel surface mining operations on a 30-acre portion, which we call the site, of a larger property at 4455 Mount Carmel Road, which is located blah, 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 blah. That is 77 acres. Footnote 1 says the parcel ID is this. If you go to Exhibit A, which is the permit, and you flip to page 2 of Exhibit A, and in that first paragraph, about the second and third line from the bottom, it says the 30-acre portion of the property as depicted on Exhibit M to the application submitted by the applicant, hereinafter the property, and property there is used with a big P. And I think that there's been some confusion regarding capitalization. And so sometimes I think that 30-acre parcel or that 30-acre portion of the property gets confused. So what this case is about is the 30 acres. This case is not about the 77 acres. The remaining portion of that 77-acre parcel that is not the 30 acres used for mining is used as a clean hard fill dump. We have submitted evidence before that we have approval to use that as a clean hard fill dump from Hamilton County Public Health. One of the questions that I think the board members put to us was, hey, what relation does the clean hard fill dump have to this 30-acre parcel? And the answer is none. Zero. Zip, zilch. This conditional permit that we're looking at here, Exhibit A, it has nothing to do with the 40-plus acres that are used as a clean hard fill dump. Nothing to do with it whatsoever. None of the conditions of the permit have anything to do with the use of that 40-plus acres. This permit and these conditions are about those 30 acres on which we conduct surface mining. It has nothing to do with the clean hard fill dump. The only relation, if you want to call it a relation, is that it's all part of a larger property. But as this permit makes clear, as it defines the property, it's the 30-acre portion. That's the big P. So hopefully that takes care of that as well. So going back to condition number 2, MSHA says that we have substantially conformed with that plot plan. I think that staff agrees that we have substantially conformed with that plot plan. Again, that is the 30-acre portion of the larger parcel only. Are there any questions about that?
Nope.
No. Number 3 has to do with how much equipment is on the site.
Can I stop you?
Yes.
Are we going to go through these again? I thought, maybe I'm wrong, but I think we covered a lot of this already. It seems like it's redundant.
It can be. I thought Ms. Wagner wanted me to keep going through them. I can stop, I can go.
Anything new that you have?
It's totally up to you
Right?
guys.
Or did you want to go through these again?
Well, I thought he had something
Yeah.
that he was going to be submitting.
No, I'm sorry. Call 513-271-1119, which is our main phone number.
Something like that.
Yeah, I think that's, something along those lines.
I
It doesn't
think
say
there's-
like buy Evans or anything like that, but it does say if you have questions about our property.
I
And
think
so,
there's a photo of it, kind of, in Exhibit V.
okay,
And Is that the same sign that he was referring to?
Catch up to here. Yep, I can see in the second photo in Exhibit V. And it's hard to see, but I think it says about,
Yeah, the gist was if you have questions but not
it
concerns.
doesn't expressly use the word complaint or concerns.
Right.
And so if the board were inclined to, for us to have a new sign that is a little more clear in that regard, obviously we'll get that done. If the board or staff wanted to email us some like proposed language to include on that sign, we would be happy to do that.
Okay.
Would you be open to having the complaints go to a third party, independent third party?
Sure, but I think then the question becomes who pays for it? And ultimately, we're going to have to resolve the complaints. And so, yeah, it sort of adds a middleman to it. I mean, generally they come right to me.
And you represent?
Yes, we would be happy to work with Paul to put that sign in a more prominent location that's more permanent, doesn't swing with the gates, right? Yeah, so long as we can work together on that, Paul, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
Did you have any more?
I have a few more.
Sure.
One of the gentlemen showed us photos about the time of work and the trucks leaving the property outside of the required hours.
Yes.
How do you propose that is rectified in the future?
So if I remember that photo, it was submitted by Mr. Gordon. And if I remember that photo, and maybe you have a copy of it, I don't, it was not time-stamped. And so we're just relying on Mr. Gordon being truthful there. And I don't want to say anything bad about Mr. Gordon. I've met him before. He's a nice individual. But suffice it to say that Mr. Gordon doesn't like Mr. Evans. And there is an ongoing dispute about a road that is nowhere close to the mine. It has nothing to do with the mine. And I think that that dispute is sort of influencing Mr. Gordon's views of how we operate the mine. And the truth is, we had the property surveyed, and I have results of the survey right here, is that Mr. Gordon has built his driveway on our property. And so I think that Mr. Gordon's not real happy with how that dispute is going, and so he's trying to hurt us in other ways. And so
We have to assume he was under oath, so we have to take his testimony at
Sure.
face value.
And I think that he testified that it was like 10 minutes or something. It was like
Correct.
7:50 in the morning, and we were only supposed to start at 8. And so one of the people here today is our truck dispatcher, Mr. Hinkston in the back there. And so, we can make sure that those trucks are not getting there any earlier at 8, and, on weekdays, I think it's 5 o'clock, they're not there any later than 5, and on Saturdays, I think it's noon. And so, yes, I will work with Mr. Hinkston, we'll make sure those trucks are operating on time, but, if I'm being candid, I just don't want the board to be overly influenced by a comment made by a guy who hates Mr. Evans, and it's 10 minutes before the time. On balance, I just don't think that that's a huge deal.
Okay. And then my third comment was, you brought up the wheel wash on site. It appeared from some of the photos that the wheel wash was actually across the street, and can you comment on that?
The wheel wash is in the mine area, so when you enter the mine, you go sort of down a driveway, and when you're coming back up, you have to go through the wheel wash. And there are some members of staff that I think are here today that have seen that wheel wash and know where it is, and perhaps if you don't take my word on it, someone from staff can pipe up, but it's not across the street, it's in the mine.
Okay.
If there are no further questions for the appellant, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak in favor of this appeal? Please step forward, sir.
Just a couple quick things and maybe help. That's a very good question you asked. But anytime, any day, anybody can call about 5 different government agencies that aren't run by Evans if they have a complaint. I mean, OSHA, MSHA, the EPA, they come out within a couple hours. So as far as an independent thing, we already have a whole bunch of them that Mr. Peterson monitors. He does a great job, so I don't have to deal with the EPA and those people. Mr. Peterson does it all. He does a really good job for us. And back to your questions on, you know, we don't even think when we did look at that picture, whether it was 10 minutes earlier or 10 minutes, we thought it came from the hard fill. We don't even think it had gravel in the truck. You know, Mr. Gordon and myself have had numerous occasions on different things, especially when the driveway's on my property. But besides that, you know, one truck, maybe 10 minutes, that didn't even come from the mine. So that's all I have, and I just want to thank everybody here.
Are there any questions for this appellant?
No.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak in favor of the appeal? Seeing none, does anyone wish to speak in opposition of the appeal? Seeing none, does the board have any final questions for anybody?
No.
Ready to close the public hearing again on this case? Motion on that.
Yeah, if you guys are ready to make a motion, then that would be the time.
I move that we close the public hearing on this case.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Nasilevich?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Ms. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Skank?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. We're just going to go to the next case, right?
Yeah. Are there any, do you want to deliberate now and discuss any conditions that would be on the new permit?
We would like for you to go ahead and deliberate now while we have legal counsel here.
I'm sorry, what?
We would like for you to go ahead and deliberate now while we have legal counsel here.
Okay. With that said, does anybody from the board wish to start us off?
Well, there were four issues. Well, there were five if you take the sub-issues, but they seem to be, in my opinion, they've been addressed. And I feel like it's, I put okay by every one of them, so I feel like we can go forward and approve this at request myself. That's my thoughts.
That's where I feel.
I know staff is also looking at some conditions as well, too, the possibility of an opacity test. There's some sign changes being discussed. So that's going to be part and parcel of that, Mr. Halpin. Is that,
Yes.
no objections to that?
No objections to any of that, right? But I think those conditions are easily met, and they're willing to meet them. So on the basis of that, I feel like we can go ahead and go forward with this and get it resolved.
Okay. Any other comments?
There was a question about extending for the 15 years and maybe doing a different time frame.
Yeah, that was brought up by Mr. Nasilevich.
Yeah, I think that was a couple meetings ago.
So that's a possibility too, rather than 15 years, 10 years, whatever the, I mean, it's, somebody can make a motion if they want to start us off on a motion, and then we can add to it, amend as we go along.
Is there any other discussion? Do we have?
Yeah, please. I mean, if you have any comments, please, sure.
No, I mean, I'm in favor of passing the motion. I just think 15 years is a long time with some of the issues that we've heard from the residents. I think that's why we're here, to hear their concerns. So I'm in favor of it. It's just, for me, it's just how long. And if you feel 15 years is fine.
Yeah, I feel 15 years is fine myself. I don't think that it, I mean, that's how it originally was put together. So to me, there's been no major infractions. I don't see any major infractions based on everything that's been presented and based on what's been said by the detractors. I feel like all that's been said has been minor stuff. It's all a matter of Evans being a responsible citizen, and beyond that, I don't see a reason to shorten it, because there are a number of oversight organizations that can shorten it with once they don't meet the requirements of the different federal and state organizations. We're a small piece in that big pie, I think. So. And their technology, their skills, I'm talking about the federal and state organizations, are far beyond our skills and technology. So I leave it to Big Brother to handle this thing, and the neighbors.
Do you have any thoughts?
I'm leaning towards approval as well, too. Does council have any input?
No, that's really up to you. Based off the evidence that you've heard, it's really up to you.
I think I'm satisfied with what I've heard from Evans and from everybody else. It should be noted, nobody else appeared in opposition today to the appeal, so I can't comment that that's resolved everything, but the fact that they didn't show up kind of speaks a little bit to me as well, too. But I'm okay with going forward with the approval. Time-wise, too, I agree with Mr. Halpin. 15 years, you do 15 years, 10 years, 5 years, 5 years is probably a little short. 10, 15 years, it seems reasonable. If somebody wants to add that on as a friendly amendment, we can consider that at the motion time. Seeing as that, is there any more discussion on this, or is somebody ready to make a motion?
I can go ahead with the motion to approve based on a request that the signage be made more visible and states that complaints be submitted to them, and that they continue to watch their work hours, and what else?
A sign for the
Time frame.
left-hand turn that need to be replaced.
Left-hand turn sign needs to make sure it's still there, and very visible. And
Capacity test.
And we can work through these when we journalize, correct? So we can,
You going to go with the 15 years, Mr. Halpin?
yeah, and let the permit go for the total 15 years. And that they continue to abide by all the different conditions and all the different requirements of the 26 points that are made.
As part of that approval, are we going to condition another opacity test?
Well, I think,
Staff recommended it.
yeah, then I guess we should. It just seems to me that Paul approved with his email.
Well, the condition was unless the Hamilton County required another one. So I don't know whether we need to do it if the Hamilton County hasn't.
My feeling, too.
So no opacity test then?
Yeah.
Okay.
As part of his motion, if somebody wishes to make a friendly amendment or add...
Sorry, just to clarify, did you say you wanted all 26 conditions that are on the current permit to continue on to the next permit?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is that all, Mr. Halpin?
Yes, sir.
Excluding the opacity test?
Yes.
Yeah, the opacity test is included in,
It's one of the conditions,
yeah,
Right.
as written.
excluding that.
As written.
Okay, okay, I see, yes, yes.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you all are looking to potentially pass a motion to approve a 15-year extension of the conditional use permit subject to the existing, by my count, there was 27 conditions in the
27.
permit that they previously had, and you would like to modify
That's correct.
condition 17 as it pertains to the signage, to make it more prominent with
Right.
some language pertaining to complaints, perhaps freestanding. Does that seem accurate?
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
We have a motion made for Mr. Halpin. Is there any Amendments? Anybody wish to make an amendment or a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Skate. We have a motion and a second. Would the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Nasalevich?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Ms. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Skank?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. With that, we will proceed on to,
5-minute recess.
okay. Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute recess. Evans can discuss with staff the next steps, but we will journalize the case later on in the meeting after the other two cases are heard.
Well,
Next meeting?
yes.
Okay, next meeting. We're adjourned for 5 minutes.
Are you ready? Okay.
We're back in session. Then we will move on to the consideration of case number 13-2018 BZA. Would staff please read the report?
Yeah, so for case number 13, 2018 BZA, the applicant is James Hugel. The property is located at 2988 Saddleback Drive. The zoning is A residence, and the request is a variance request to allow a 6-foot-high privacy fence in the side yard, where 6-foot-high privacy fences are only permitted in the rear yard, per Article 5.2A9 of the Anderson Township zoning resolution. A little bit of history about this case. The house was constructed in 1966, and the current owner purchased the property in November of 2017. In April of 2004, a retaining wall was constructed on the property. In July of 2004, a zoning certificate was issued for a 4-foot-high, 75% open split-rail fence to be installed in the rear yard. In May of 2018, a zoning certificate was issued for a 4-foot-high, 75% open split-rail fence in the rear yard. At that time, a zoning certificate was refused for a 6-foot-high privacy fence in the rear and side yard. In June of 2018, Anderson Township received a complaint on this property that a 6-foot-high privacy fence was being installed in the side yard without a zoning certificate. After inspection of the property, the violation was confirmed and a notice of violation was sent to the property owner. So this is the property in question. The fence is the side yard in this portion of this. Wait a second, let me get my pointer. And this fence is being proposed in this area, you'll see on the site plan. This is an aerial of the property. Property in question is outlined in red. And this is the topography of that site. So this is where the 6-foot fence is being proposed. These are pictures that staff took while we were on site. The fence has been constructed, and this is a picture of it in the side yard. This is the other side of the property. And again, the fence on the opposite side of the yard. So staff findings, staff is of the opinion that the variance is not substantial. The essential character of the neighborhood would not be altered, and adjoining properties would not suffer a substantial detriment as a result of the variance. Due to the orientation of the house, the adjacent property at 2980 Saddleback Drive would be permitted to construct a 6-foot fence on the property line in the same location as the proposed fence. The variance would not adversely affect the delivery of governmental services. The owner's predicament can be feasibly obviated through some method other than a variance. Building a 4-foot-high fence in the side yard would result in compliance with the Anderson Township zoning resolution, although the owner has expressed that the neighbor's dogs are able to jump over the existing 4-foot-high fence. Staff is of the opinion that the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed by granting the variance based on the orientation of the adjacent house and the definition of side and rear yards in the Anderson Township zoning resolution. So this is the type of fence that has been installed, and these are the standards to be considered. So be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the board of staff?
No.
Well, the appellant, that's you, sir? Yes, sir. Have you been sworn in yet?
I have not.
Can you please step forward to the podium, please? Raise your right hand. Swear to tell the whole truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you, sir. Would you please state your name, address, and affiliation with the case for the record?
James E. Hugel, 2988 Saddleback Drive, Cincinnati, Ohio, 45244, and I am the property owner.
Thank you, sir. You may proceed.
Just, it's, the reason for this, I'm sure you're probably wondering why I went ahead and put up the fence with it already being turned down, it was a safety issue. Gentleman next door's got two pit bulls. I've got two granddaughters. I was traveling out of the country quite a bit through the summer, and I did not want my wife at home with our grandchildren in the yard when the pit bulls have come into our backyard before. It's just as simple as a safety issue. And I'd rather been able to put a 4-foot fence up, but I've got pictures if you'd like to see more pictures of the dogs. I've got pictures of how they get over the fence. I've got a lot. I just didn't know how in-depth you wanted to get with things.
I think your testimony is fine for me.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak in favor of this appeal? Seeing none, does anyone wish to speak in opposition to this appeal? Seeing none, is the board ready to close the public hearing on this case?
Yep.
Motion closed.
I'm sorry?
A second.
We got a motion, motion and a second. The secretary, please call the roll.
We don't need a motion.
Just move on to the next case.
Okay. Mr. Nasilevich?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Ms. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Skank?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye.
We'll move on to the next case, and then we can deliberate at the end.
Thank you.
The next presentation, or the next case will be presented by our co-op, PJ Ginty.
So for case 14-2018 BZA, applicant Matt Klein, the property owner of 7621 Forest Road. Zoning is B residence, excuse me. The request is a variance to allow a 6-foot-high privacy fence to be located in the front yard of the property, where only 4-foot-high, 75% open fences are permitted in the front yard per the Anderson Township zoning resolution, and a variance request to allow a 6-foot-high privacy fence to be located on the panhandle portion of the property where fences are prohibited per the Anderson Township zoning resolution. So the house was built in 1941 and is non-conforming by today's zoning standards. The applicant purchased the home in March 2017. In June 2017, the applicant was granted a variance by the Board of Zoning Appeals in case 17-2017 BZA for a second-story addition, which was approved to have a rear setback of 31 feet 8 inches, where 35 feet is required. The addition has since been completed. In December 2017, the applicant was approved for a circular asphalt driveway modification, and then in March of 2018, the applicant was granted a variance by the Board of Zoning Appeals in case 4-2018 BZA that allowed the 2 existing accessory structures that were constructed in the front yard of the property before purchase by the applicant to remain where they are now. So looking at the property map, Forest Road is to the east of this property. The driveway runs along the panhandle portion of the property. As you can see in the front yard of the house, there are the two non-conforming structures that have been approved by the BZA in March. The site is relatively flat. This is the applicant's proposed site plan. It'd be a 6-foot-high solid privacy fence, 29 feet in length along the panhandle portion of the property, and 51 feet in length along the front yard of the property. This is the view from Forest Road, looking back towards the existing house along the driveway. These are the two existing structures that were approved in March in Case 4, 2018 BZA. This is the area of the proposed fence. So looking to the west here, or to the east, excuse me, is the panhandle portion of the property along the driveway. And then over to your right is the front yard portion of the fence and property. So again, the location of the fence, as you can see, there is existing vegetation in this area, and the driveway runs pretty close to the property line. This is the existing single-family home. And then is looking to the west, back at the garage and asphalt driveway. And this is the fence image submitted by the applicant. It'd be about 6 feet in height, about 80 feet in length total. Staff is of the opinion that the variance is not substantial. The proposed privacy fence screens the applicant's house from the property to the southeast. The essential character of the neighborhood would not be altered, and adjoining properties would not suffer a detriment as a result of the variance. Due to the orientation of the lot, the adjacent properties at 7625, 7617, and 7609 Forest Road would be permitted to construct a 6-foot-high fence in the applicant's front yard property line, which is a similar location as the proposed 6-foot-high privacy fence. The variance would not adversely affect the delivery of governmental services. The owner's predicament can be feasibly obviated through some other method other than a variance. Building a 4-foot-high fence in the front yard would result in compliance with the Anderson Township zoning resolution. However, building a fence in the panhandle portion of the lot is in violation. The intent of the applicant is to screen their property from the neighbors to the east. The applicant has limited area for landscaping, and existing vegetation is not conducive to planting an evergreen screen in the location of the proposed fence. Staff is of the opinion that the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed by granting this variance, based on the shape of the lot and the presence of the rear yards of the 3 lots to the east, which would permit a solid fence in the same location. And these are the standards to be considered, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board of staff?
No questions.
Seeing none, does the appellant wish to address the board?
Yes.
Please step forward. You've been sworn in, sir?
Yes.
Please state your name, address, affiliation with the case.
My name is Matthew Klein. I own the property at 7621 Forest Road. Okay? And I certainly do appreciate your time and your consideration this evening. This is the 3rd time that I am coming before this board. And most of that revolves around my neighbor, who it seems I have become his hobby of harassment. I don't know if any of you have visited the property in question. You have? Okay. The corner that we're talking about putting the fence, if my neighbor wished to have the same fence in the same location, he would not have to get a variance. It would automatically get granted, and that's because my property doesn't dance real well with the zoning laws that were made after the property was established. That corner cannot be witnessed by my neighbor from his house or his yard. There is just a jungle of foliage between the end of his property and the beginning of mine. Yet he continues to put garbage on the corner line, put stumps on the corner line and spray paint them, tear up any plants I have, moves boundary line markers, okay, because he can do that because I don't live there. Nobody lives there, so he comes out at night and he does this. And so I've thought about putting up plants, and I have done that, and he's destroyed them. And he's set up cameras to watch the front of my house through that corner piece of property. He's continually harassing me with this and trying to intimidate me with this. There are times I wish I was 16 years old, because I guarantee you there'd be ways to take care of this. But I'm 68, I can't do that, okay? And that's why I am coming to you and asking you to allow me some respite here by building a fence that he can't even see, that he would be allowed to build. Are there any questions?
How far up the panhandle would the fence be going? All the way up to the street, or?
Oh, no, sir. No, sir. It'll be going up from the corner marker. Go back one. Okay.
Okay, so
There's, wherever the corner marker is, it's going to be about 21 feet up to the power pole. Okay? And then there'll be another section going along the edge in front of my house. Going all the way up to the street would be an onerous expense. It would be killer, because that driveway is 250 feet long.
Okay. Is that the corner where there was a problem with when you did your circle?
No,
Okay.
no, it wasn't. It wasn't. I had an existing driveway, and it was recommended to me, because I'm putting a loop on the end of it, that I should get a permit for doing that.
No other questions?
Okay, sir.
And what is your residence? You don't live here?
I do not live at that house. My intent was to buy the house, fix it, and sell it. But as it turns out, I might wind up living there, who knows?
So what is your address? Your
You
residential
mean my mailing address?
Mhm.
8534 Wyoming Club Drive, Cincinnati, 15.
And the house is currently for sale?
Yes.
It's late.
Seeing none, does anyone wish to speak in opposition of this appeal?
I'm amazed.
Seeing none, does the board wish to, does the board have any other further questions for the appellant, for staff, or do they wish to close the public hearing?
I move that we close the public hearing.
A motion and a second. Secretary, please call the roll.
All right. Mr. Naslevich?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Ms. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Skank?
Yes.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. Now that the public hearing is closed, the board will now deliberate on the cases. We'll start with case number 13 with 10. 10 we're going to be doing next month. So with case number 13-2018 BZA, does anybody wish to start us off?
Should I stay?
You're welcome to stay, sir. We're going to be, next few minutes, we'll probably decide on the cases.
Okay,
and then,
I'll wait.
yeah.
No problem.
I move that we go ahead and approve case number 2018, and that the work be done be started within a year and be completed within 2.
Should be pretty easy considering they already put it out.
Oh, that's right.
Good point. That's still good, a good recommendation. We have a motion. Does anybody wish to discuss the case, or do we have a second on the motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Naslevich?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Ms. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Skank?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. That will move on to deliberation of case number 14-2018 BZA. Does anybody wish to start us off on this case?
I move Can I make a motion?
Certainly can.
I move that we go ahead and approve the request as submitted, and that the fence, or the project be started within a year and completed within 2.
Second.
We have a motion. How about a friendly amendment to add the, in accordance with the plans and the drawings dated October 16th, 2018?
In accordance with the plans dated October 16th, 2018.
We have a motion and a second. Do you agree with the amendment, Mr. Shane?
Yes.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Nasalevich?
Aye.
Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Ms. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Skank?
Yes.
Mr. Sion?
Aye.
So now, is that going to be a white fence?
You know,
Let's adjourn
that was
first.
my original thought, but the house is kind of
Case, is it 14-218?
13-2018. Yep.
Oh, 13-2018.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Nasalevich? Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Ms. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Skank?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. And for a motion to, on the consideration of case number, journalization of 14-2018 BZA, can we get a motion to journalize and approve?
I move that we approve and journalize case number 14-2018.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Mr. Nasalevich? Mr. Halpin?
Aye.
Ms. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Skank?
Aye.
Mr. Sion?
Aye. With that, do we have any further business for the meeting?
Next meeting's Thursday, the 6th.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll let somebody else do it. I move that we adjourn.
We have a second? Second. Meeting adjourned.